My name is Darcy Ingram, and I'm 32 years old. 3 days before my wedding, my dad called. It was a Tuesday, and I was in my workshop trimming roses for the centerpieces, soil under my nails, music playing quietly in the background, when his name appeared on my caller ID. I picked up with my elbow because my hands were wet. "I'm not walking you down the aisle." 6 words. That's all it took. I set the pruning shears on the counter, wiped my hands on my jeans, and said nothing for about 5 seconds, which doesn't sound like long until you're the one counting every second. "Vanessa says it would upset her," he added. My sister. Vanessa was 3 years older than me, married, had 2 children, and somehow remained at the center of every decision my parents made, even decisions about my wedding. "Your sister is going through a rough time, Darcy. Her marriage, you know." Did know. But this was my wedding, not hers. 10 minutes later, my mother called to finish the job. "Go solo. Stop making drama. Lots of modern brides walk alone." She said it like she was reading from a brochure. 48 hours later, 200 people would turn toward the barn doors as they opened, and the man holding my arm would not be my father. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we share stories about family, boundaries, and the people who show up when it matters most. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your own family, stay with me, and don't forget to subscribe. I grew up in Ridgewood, Connecticut, surrounded by white clapboard houses, Saturday leaf blowers, and the kind of town where everyone knows your mailbox but not necessarily your middle name. Vanessa was the bright one. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, piano recitals where my parents sat in the front row with their cameras ready. My dad introduced her at neighborhood cookouts the same way every time. "This is Vanessa. She's going to be a lawyer." He said it like it had already happened. I was the one who came home with dirt on my knees. When I was 14, I built a greenhouse in our backyard using scrap wood from a neighbor's renovation, plastic sheeting from the hardware store, and a hinge I had pulled from an old cabinet. It stood 7 feet tall, and it wasn't pretty, but by August, it was growing tomatoes the size of my fist. That year, my school science fair fell on the same Saturday as Vanessa's regional spelling bee. I entered my greenhouse tomatoes, heirloom seeds, carefully controlled soil pH, and a growth journal filled with daily photographs. I won first place. By the time my dad arrived, the blue ribbon was already pinned to my poster board, and the judges were stacking chairs. "Sorry, kiddo. Vanessa's event ran long." He glanced at the ribbon, nodded, and said, "Good job," in the same way you might say it to a stranger's child at a checkout counter. Then he checked his phone. That greenhouse stayed in the backyard for 9 years. I repaired the hinge twice and replaced the sheeting once. My mother called it an eyesore. My father called it nothing. He never mentioned it again. But it kept growing tomatoes every summer, whether anyone noticed or not. My high school graduation was on a Thursday in June. That same week, Vanessa received her acceptance letter to Columbia's MBA program. My parents decided to combine our celebrations into one dinner at Ristorante Luca downtown. 3 speeches were given, and all 3 were about Vanessa. My dad raised his glass to "our college girl." My mother wiped her eyes and said she had always known Vanessa would do great things. Vanessa thanked them for believing in her. I ate my pasta and clapped in all the right places. No one mentioned my diploma. I had graduated with a 3.7 GPA and been accepted into the University of Connecticut's horticulture program. I had paid my own application fee with money from the landscaping jobs I had been running since sophomore year. Mowing lawns, weeding gardens, and planting flower beds for 6 neighbors at $40 each. When I told my mother about my horticulture degree, she set her coffee mug down and looked at me as if I had just spoken another language. "That is not a real career, Darcy." 5 words. She said them once to my face and, apparently, many more times behind my back. Ruth Kellerman, our neighbor 3 doors down and my grandmother Eleanor's closest friend, told me years later that she had overheard my mother saying the same thing to her sister on the phone. "Darcy is studying gardening. I don't even know what to tell people." Vanessa's MBA tuition was paid in full by my parents, $22,000 a year. I knew the number because my mother, Donna, mentioned it at Thanksgiving like it was a public service announcement. My tuition I paid myself. Landscaping in the summers. Greenhouse work on campus during the school year. Student loans for the rest. Nobody announced my balance at the dinner table. Vanessa married Preston Hale 3 years after Columbia. And by then, my parents had already made their choice about which daughter deserved their attention. I just didn't know yet how far they were willing to take it, or what would happen when the daughter they had spent years overlooking finally stopped asking to be seen. Preston worked in investment banking. He wore a charcoal suit to the rehearsal dinner and cufflinks that cost more than my monthly truck payment. My parents glowed at his wedding as if they had personally arranged the stock market. Then the grandchildren came. Lily was born first and is now 5. Owen arrived 2 years later and is now 3. My dad retired from his insurance firm the same year Owen was born, and those 2 children quickly became the center of his universe. He drove to Vanessa's house in Darien 3 times a week. He built Lily a swing set. He read Owen the same train book 47 times because Owen screamed whenever he stopped. Vanessa noticed. She noticed the way you notice a lever you can pull. The first time she used the children was over the Christmas seating arrangement. Vanessa wanted the head of the table, so my dad gave it to her. The second time was over a family photo. Vanessa wanted it retaken without me in the background, and my dad asked me to step aside. The third time I heard it myself. The call was on speakerphone, and my dad didn't realize I was in the kitchen. If you walk her down the aisle, I will not bring the kids to Christmas. My dad paused. I could hear his breathing through the phone. Then Vanessa's voice came again, calm and practiced. I mean it, Dad. It's too much for me right now. You know what I'm going through. My dad finally said, Okay, Nessa. Okay. My mom walked into the kitchen 30 seconds later and saw my face. She knew I had heard. Her response was not an apology. She's their mother, Richard. Don't push her. That was the hierarchy. Vanessa first, then the grandchildren, then my parents' comfort, and somewhere below the property taxes, me. I met Marcus Delaney on a Tuesday in April 3 years ago. I was planting a rain garden for a county drainage project along Route 12, and he was the structural engineer building a bridge 60 yards upstream. We both showed up at 6:30 in the morning, and we both drank black coffee from thermoses. He saw me hauling a bare root plant out of my truck bed and walked over without being asked. Need a hand? I've got it. I know, but my coffee is gone and I'm bored. That was the first sentence Marcus ever said to me that wasn't about drainage grades. Our first date was a nursery tour followed by tacos from a food truck in the parking lot. He had dirt on his boots. I had dirt on mine. It was the most natural evening of my life. He introduced me to his dad 2 weeks later. Frank Delaney was 63, a retired carpenter with hands like leather gloves left in the sun too long. He lived alone in the same house he had built with Marcus's mother, who had died of pancreatic cancer 8 years earlier. There was a workshop in the back with sawdust covering every surface and a radio permanently tuned to a classic rock station that I'm not sure he ever turned off. Frank called me kiddo by week 3. By month 2, he had built me a bookshelf for my workshop, white oak smoothly sanded with dovetailed joints. He carved my initials into the inside of the left panel. DI small enough that you would miss them unless you knew where to look. I run my fingers over those letters every morning when I open the shop. You've got dirt under your nails, he said the first time he visited my greenhouse. Good. Means you built something today. Nobody in my family had ever said that to me. Marcus proposed in the botanical garden I had designed for the Ridgewood Public Library. It was an October evening, and the Japanese maples were turning that deep burgundy that makes people stop their cars. He got down on one knee beside the stone bench I had set into the path 2 summers earlier. I said yes before he finished the question. That night I called my parents. My dad picked up on the 4th ring. Told him. There was silence for about 3 seconds. Then he said, Congratulations. Not, I'm happy for you. Not, tell me everything. Just the word you say when a coworker announces a promotion. My mom took the phone. Is he from a good family? She didn't ask if I was happy. She didn't ask about the ring, the garden, or the evening. She asked about his family the way she might ask about his credit score. He is, I said. His dad is a carpenter. Silence again, the kind where someone is choosing not to say what they're thinking. I sent the wedding invitation by hand. I designed it myself, with botanical illustrations along the border and a pressed fern tucked inside the flap. I drove it to my parents' house and left it in the mailbox because I didn't want to stand there and watch them open it. I also asked my dad to walk me down the aisle. He said yes quickly, almost reflexively, like someone agreeing to hold a door. Marcus gave me the look he always gives me when I offer my parents another chance they haven't earned. He placed his hand on my knee and looked at me with those steady brown eyes. You know who they are, Dar. I know, I said. But I want to give them one more chance. He nodded. Marcus never tells me what to do with my family. He just makes sure I have somewhere soft to land afterward. The call came on a Tuesday evening, 3 days before the wedding. I was in my workshop trimming the last roses for the centerpieces. 14 arrangements, each one hand-tied. The radio was playing something with a fiddle, and I was humming along when the phone lit up on the workbench. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered. Darcy, I need to tell you something. His voice was the one he used when he was about to deliver bad news to a client. Steady, detached, professionally avoidant. I'm not going to walk you down the aisle. The pruning shears were still in my other hand. I set them down slowly, the way you set something down when you're not sure you can hold it without breaking it. Vanessa says it would upset her. Dad. Vanessa isn't getting married. I am. She says seeing me give you away would be too painful right now. Her marriage is going through a rough patch. You know that. So my wedding day is about her feelings. There was a long silence. I could hear the television in his den, some game show playing in the background. I'm sorry, Darcy. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I asked him one question, the only one that mattered. Did Vanessa threaten you with the kids again? More silence. Then his voice dropped lower, as if someone might hear. She said if I walked you down the aisle, she wouldn't bring Lily and Owen to Christmas. There it was, the lever. The same lever she had been pulling for years, and the same lever he had been folding to every single time. His grandchildren traded for his daughter's wedding day, and he chose the trade without blinking. Okay, Dad. Darcy, please understand. Okay. I hung up, set the phone on the workbench, picked up the shears, and finished the 14th arrangement. My hands didn't shake. I wanted them to. Shaking would have meant I was surprised. I wasn't surprised. I was just finally done pretending I might be. My mom called 10 minutes later. Right on schedule. Donna Ingram didn't leave loose ends. Your father told you. Yes. Darcy, don't make this bigger than it is. Go solo. Lots of modern brides walk alone. It's actually quite empowering if you think about it. She said empowering the way someone says organic when they don't actually buy organic. Mom, I asked Dad a year ago. He said yes. Things change. Your sister is hurting and you're not. Pause. I heard her take a breath. The measured kind she used before saying something she had already decided was reasonable. You have Marcus. Vanessa has no one right now. I almost laughed. Almost. Because the math of it was so perfectly Donna. Vanessa's pain outweighed mine because Vanessa's pain always outweighed mine. Not because it was greater. 'Cause it was hers. Stop making drama, Darcy. This is not the hill. I hung up and walked out onto the porch, sitting on the top step. The October air was cold enough to see my breath, but not cold enough to make me go inside. I held my phone in both hands and stared at the garden I had planted when I moved into this house 4 years ago. Hydrangeas along the fence, lavender by the walkway, and a dogwood I had planted during my first spring there that was now taller than me. Marcus found me 20 minutes later. I wasn't crying. I was just sitting there, holding the phone like it was something I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. He sat beside me. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't say, I told you so. He just stayed. Just put his arm around my shoulder and waited. After a while I stood up, walked through the workshop, stopped at the oak bookshelf Frank had built for me, ran my fingers along the inside panel, found the carved letters, D.I., and traced them twice before going to bed. Wednesday morning, 2 days before the wedding, Marcus made eggs the way I liked them. Scrambled with chives from the windowsill pot. He somehow kept alive for me because I could run a professional landscaping business but apparently couldn't keep an indoor plant from drowning. He set the plate down, sat across from me, and waited. My dad isn't walking me. I heard you on the phone. He poured coffee. What do you want to do? Not I'll fix this. Not let me call them. Just what do you want to do? That was Marcus. He didn't rescue me. He stood beside me and handed me the thing I needed. I don't want to walk alone. Then you won't. He took a sip, set his mug down, and looked at me the way he looked at a structural plan. Calm, focused, already 3 steps ahead. Your dad has been practicing his Thai not since the engagement. I watched him YouTube it twice last Sunday. I smiled despite myself. The first one in 12 hours. I can't ask Frank to do that. It's too much. Dar, that man built you a bookshelf he didn't have to build. He drives 40 minutes to your shop on Saturdays to fix hinges you never asked him to fix. He set a place for you at Sunday dinner 2 months after we started dating and hasn't removed it since. I stared down at my eggs. He has been waiting. Marcus nodded. He just didn't want to overstep. The thought made something crack open in my chest. Not pain but something warmer. The realization that the person I needed had been there for 3 years, sanding wood in his garage, calling me kiddo, and showing up for every single thing my own father had skipped. Okay, I said. I'll ask him today. An hour later, Jeanette called. My best friend and maid of honor was the kind of woman who would tell you your hair looked terrible before a date and then fix it in 90 seconds. She had run into Vanessa at a salon in Darien that morning. Same colorist, apparently. Small towns have long arms. Your sister was there, Jeanette said. And she was not subtle. What did she say? She was telling the colorist about your wedding. How stressful it was, how it was making everything about Darcy again. Closed my eyes. Again. That was her word. She said, and I am quoting, Darcy always gets the attention now. Ever since she started that garden business. It's like the rest of us don't exist. I nearly dropped the phone. Darcy always gets the attention. Me. The one who won a science fair to an empty chair. The one whose graduation dinner became a Columbia acceptance party. The one whose career was publicly labeled, not real, by her own mother. She also said, and I wish I were making this up, her little garden business isn't even real work. There it was. The same sentence. Donna's words in Vanessa's mouth, passed down like a family recipe nobody had asked for. Jeanette's voice softened. She's not upset about the wedding, Dar. Is jealous. You have Marcus. You have your business. You have a life that doesn't need her to validate it, and she can't stand it. I sat with that for a minute. Jeanette was right about most things and she was right about this. Vanessa didn't want my dad to walk me because it would hurt her. She wanted him to stay home because my happiness was something she couldn't control, and controlling the aisle walk was the closest she could get. I should tell you about Thanksgiving. Last November, Vanessa hosted because Donna insisted. Your sister has the bigger dining room. This was technically true. It was also beside the point. Preston sat at the head of the table in a shirt that probably cost what I charged for a full garden installation. He checked his phone 11 times during dinner. I counted because I was seated directly across from him, and there was nothing else to look at while Donna talked about Vanessa's kitchen renovation. Vanessa was loud that night. Not normally loud, but the kind of loud where you're trying to fill a room so nobody hears the silence underneath. She laughed at things that weren't funny, refilled glasses that were still half full, and touched Preston's arm twice. He didn't react either time. Then Lily said it. She was 5, had mashed potatoes on her chin, and said it the way 5-year-olds say everything. Clearly, honestly, and without understanding what it means. Why does Daddy sleep in the office? The table went quiet. Preston looked up from his phone, and Vanessa's face did something I had never seen before. It folded. Not anger, not embarrassment, but something underneath both. My dad cleared his throat and asked Owen if he wanted more bread, but I saw Vanessa's hands shaking as she poured the wine. It was only a small tremor, maybe 2 seconds, before she straightened, smiled, and passed the cranberry sauce as if nothing had happened. I understood something that night. Vanessa's marriage wasn't going through a rough patch. It was going through the floor. And instead of dealing with the cracks, she was rearranging the furniture on top of them. My wedding was simply the latest piece of furniture she needed to move. Wednesday morning, 2 days before the wedding, I drove to Frank's house. He lived on a dead-end road off Route 9 in a town called Chester, in a brown-shingled single-story house with a porch he had rebuilt in 2019 and a garage that smelled like linseed oil and cedar. The radio in his workshop played classic rock at a volume suggesting he believed Led Zeppelin should be experienced as background music for all human activities. He was sanding a rocking chair when I pulled in, a beautiful piece made from teak with a rich, unmistakable grain. He wore his work apron, the one with sawdust permanently embedded in the fabric like a second texture. I stood at the garage door for a full 10 seconds before he looked up. "Hey, kiddo." He blew dust off the armrest. "Coffee's inside." "Frank." He must have heard something in my voice because he immediately set down the sandpaper, turned to face me, and wiped his hands on his apron. My dad backed out of walking me down the aisle. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't ask why. He didn't shake his head or offer an opinion about my father, my family, or the situation. He simply looked at me with those steady gray eyes, the same eyes Marcus had, and said 5 words. "When do you need me?" That was the sentence. That was the whole thing. No hesitation. No, "Are you sure?" No, "Let me think about it." The man had been sanding a chair, and in his very next breath, he was offering to walk me into my future as if it had already been written on his calendar. "Saturday, 1 o'clock. I'll be there at noon." He picked up the sandpaper and started sanding again, then added more quietly, "Kiddo, I've been waiting for someone to ask." I cried in the car on the way home, the first time all week. The next 48 hours moved like a current. Jeanette handled the logistics with the calm efficiency of someone who had planned 3 baby showers and once organized a surprise birthday party during a blizzard. She updated the seating chart. The father of the bride's seat at the head table was reassigned. The front row center aisle seat was now labeled Frank Delaney, the seat my dad had been supposed to fill. Marcus took his dad's suit shopping Thursday after work. Frank had a sport coat from 2011 that he swore still fit. Marcus sent me a photo from the fitting room. Frank in a new charcoal suit, looking simultaneously proud and uncomfortable. His rough hands sticking out from the pressed cuffs as if they didn't belong to the same outfit. Marcus texted beneath the photo. He asked me 3 times if the tie was straight. That evening I wrote my vows in the workshop. The oak bookshelf was to my left. Frank's initials were carved into the panel to my right. A cutting board he had started as our wedding gift sat nearby, and he clearly thought I didn't know about it. I wrote by hand on the back of a landscape sketch, crossed out lines, rewrote them, and finally settled on something simple. My parents didn't call Wednesday. They didn't call Thursday. They didn't text. I checked my phone twice Thursday night, then put it in the kitchen drawer. Marcus noticed. He didn't say anything. He simply made tea and left a mug on my nightstand. I didn't tell my parents about Frank. They assumed I would walk alone. I let them assume. The doors would open Saturday, and the answer would be standing right beside me. Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the wedding, I was reorganizing the centerpieces in the workshop when someone knocked at the front door. It was Ruth Kellerman, 68 years old, with silver hair always pulled back neatly. She lived 3 houses down from my parents and had been my grandmother Eleanor's closest friend for 40 years. When Eleanor died 11 years ago, Ruth was the one who sat with her at the end. She was also the person who later told me about Donna calling my career gardening behind my back. Now Ruth stood on my porch holding a yellowed envelope. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this," she said. "The week before she passed, she told me to hold it until you were getting married." Ruth's eyes were damp. I've been carrying it for 11 years, Darcy. I was beginning to think it would outlast me. The envelope was soft at the edges. My grandmother's handwriting was on the front, just my name. Darcy. I opened it at the kitchen table while Ruth sat across from me in silence. The letter was short, 12 sentences, because Eleanor had always been efficient with words. Darcy, when you read this, you are about to walk into the most important room of your life. I wish I could be there. I wish I could tell your mother to sit down and let you shine. I wish I could tell your father to look up from whatever is distracting him and see you. But I know how that family works. So let me say what they will not. You have always been the one who builds. From that greenhouse to whatever you are building now, you make things grow where nothing was. Do not wait for them to see it. The people who show up are your real family. Love you. Build something beautiful. I read it 3 times, folded it carefully, and placed it inside the clutch I would carry on Saturday. The people who show up are your real family. Thursday night passed without a call. Friday was the same. No text, no voicemail, no last-minute change of heart from Richard or Donna. That evening was the rehearsal dinner. Frank drove 40 minutes from Chester, arrived 20 minutes early, and immediately helped the caterers move tables because he couldn't stand watching someone carry a folding table incorrectly. There were 30 guests, all from Marcus's side. My college roommate Alexis, 2 women from the greenhouse workshop I ran for local mothers on Saturday mornings, Ruth, Jeanette, of course, and absolutely nobody from my family. The barn venue looked beautiful, with open sides, string lights, and wildflower arrangements I had designed and grown myself. Lavender, Queen Anne's lace, and late-season dahlias in copper vases I had found at an estate sale in Litchfield. When Frank stood for the toast, he held his glass the way he held a chisel. Firmly, like he meant it. "I'm not a man of many words," he said. "Ask Marcus. He'll confirm that." Few people laughed softly. But I will say this. 3 years ago, a woman showed up at my son's job site and hauled a root ball out of a truck like it owed her money. I liked her immediately. He paused and looked at me. I never got a daughter. God just made me wait a little longer. The room went quiet. Jeanette pressed a napkin to her eyes, and Marcus placed his hand on my knee beneath the table. Frank raised his glass. "To Darcy, who makes things grow." I looked at his wrist and saw a trace of sawdust caught in the fold of his cuff. He had come straight from the workshop. He always came straight from the workshop. That was Friday. Saturday was the wedding. That same Friday evening, 40 minutes south, my father sat alone in his garage. I didn't know this at the time. Jeanette told me weeks later that a friend in Ridgewood had seen Richard at a gas station near his house and exchanged a few words with him. She said he looked like a man carrying something too heavy to put down and too painful to hold. He sat in the garage where he usually parked his sedan, on a folding chair, staring at the wall. A photograph was pinned to the pegboard. Me at 12, holding a tomato from the greenhouse and grinning like I had invented sunlight. He had hung that photo years ago and apparently never taken it down, even after the greenhouse was gone. Donna had made him dismantle it when I left for college. "It's an eyesore, Richard." Donna came out to the garage around 9. "Are we going tomorrow?" Richard looked at her. "I think we should." "Fine. But we sit in the back. I'm not going to let Darcy turn this into some kind of statement." Richard nodded. He opened his phone and typed a message to me. "I am proud of you, Darcy." He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he read it again, deleted every word, locked his phone and went inside. I didn't learn about that message until much later. But I think about it sometimes. Not with sadness exactly, but with a tired understanding. My father isn't a cruel man. He's a weak one. And weakness, when it lives in the same house as control, becomes cruelty by default. He went to bed without sending anything. Friday evening, 9:45. My phone buzzed. "Vanessa. I heard you are not walking alone. Who is walking you?" I looked at the screen, turned the phone face down, and didn't reply. 11 minutes later, Jeanette forwarded me a screenshot. Vanessa had texted her. "Do you know who is walking Darcy tomorrow?" She won't answer me. Jeanette's response was a single period. Nothing else. I loved her for that. Vanessa called my dad next. I knew because Richard texted Marcus, not me. At 10:15, Marcus showed me the message. Vanessa is upset. She thinks Darcy is bringing someone to walk her down the aisle to embarrass us. Maybe we shouldn't go. Marcus typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too, then set the phone down and looked at me. Your dad just asked if we're trying to embarrass them. My own wedding. That was what he said. I took a breath, held it, and let it go. Donna called Richard back, as I found out later from Ruth, who seemed to have contacts I would never fully understand. Donna told him they were going. I will not give her the satisfaction of saying we weren't there. Classic Donna. Attendance as a strategic position, not an act of love. Then Vanessa sent one final text to my dad, which Ruth forwarded to me later. If you're going, then I'm coming too. And that was the setup. Saturday morning. A wedding, 200 guests, a carpenter in a charcoal suit, and 3 uninvited spectators in the back row who still thought the day was about them. I woke at 5:15. The house was dark. Marcus had slept at Frank's. Tradition, he said, though I suspected it was mostly so Frank wouldn't pace around the kitchen alone all night. I made coffee and sat on the porch. The garden was wrapped in early morning fog. Everything softened like a watercolor someone had left out in the rain. The hydrangeas along the fence were fading. Late October does that. But the lavender still held. Lavender always holds longer than you expect. My phone had 2 messages. Frank. Ready when you are, kiddo. Tie is straight. I checked 4 times. Marcus. See you at the end of the aisle. I'll be the one who can't stop smiling. I looked at my hands. Calluses on the pads below my index fingers from years of using pruning shears. A thin scar on my left thumb from a greenhouse repair gone wrong when I was 17. Soil under the nail of my right ring finger that I must have missed in the shower. These hands built a greenhouse when I was 14. They planted lavender and hydrangeas. They dug beds for 6 neighbors at £40 each. They signed a business license, shook hands with clients, and arranged 14 centerpieces for a wedding my own parents could barely be bothered to attend with grace. I finished my coffee, washed the mug, showered, dried my hair, and pinned it up with a pearl hairpin Ruth had given me along with Eleanor's letter. It had belonged to my grandmother. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw exactly what I expected. Not a victim, not a broken daughter, just a woman with dirt-stained hands and a clear plan for the day. I picked up my clutch with Eleanor's letter inside and drove to the venue. It was a converted barn on a hill outside Ridgewood, with open sides and cedar beams, the kind of place that looked like it had hosted weddings for a century but had actually been a dairy barn until 2016. I had done the flowers myself. Wild flower bundles in copper vases, lavender, Queen Anne's lace, late-season dahlias, and sprigs of rosemary because my grandmother always said rosemary was for remembrance. The altar was framed with climbing clematis I had trained on a wooden trellis Marcus had built. The whole place smelled like earth in October. Jeanette was already in the bridal suite when I arrived. She had my makeup kit open and a mimosa in hand. You look like a woman who has been awake since 5:15. Close enough. Sit down. She worked quickly. Foundation, blush, and a lip color she called Quiet Power, which I was fairly certain she had invented on the spot. Ruth arrived at 10 with a small velvet box. Inside were a pair of pearl drop earrings. Your grandmother's, Ruth said. She wore these to her own wedding in 1974. Something borrowed and something old, both in one. I held them in my palm. They were warm, as if someone had just taken them off. Alexis and my 2 college friends arrived next. The 5 of us filled the bridal suite. Jeanette fixing my hair, Ruth sitting in the corner with her hands folded in her lap like a woman who had been waiting 11 years for exactly this morning. No mother. No sister. Jeanette caught me glancing at the door once. Stop looking at that door, Dar. Everyone who matters is already in this room. She wasn't wrong, but it still stung. The way an old bruise stings when you bump it against something you thought you had finally moved out of the way. Then came a knock at the door. At 10:45, Jeanette opened the door. Frank stood in the doorway wearing his new charcoal suit, a white shirt, and the navy tie Marcus had picked out. His hands hung at his sides, still rough and scarred from decades of working with wood, nails, and the things he had built for other people. He saw me in my dress and stopped. For a man who spent his life measuring cuts to the 16th of an inch, Frank was remarkably imprecise with his emotions. His eyes filled immediately. His jaw tightened. He blinked twice hard and then said, "Oh, kiddo. Don't cry, Frank. I just got my mascara on. I'm not crying. Sawdust gets everywhere." Jeanette laughed from across the room. Ruth smiled. Frank reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, walnut, hand-finished. Inside was a boutonniere made from dried oak leaves and baby's breath, wrapped in twine. "Made it this morning. Figured flowers from a store wouldn't feel right for you." I pinned it to his lapel. The oak leaves came from his workshop, the same white oak as the bookshelf, the same wood that had quietly become part of my life over the past 3 years, built into the walls of my daily routine. "You look beautiful," he said, then corrected himself. "No, you look strong." Nobody had ever said that to me on a day when I was supposed to look beautiful, and it was exactly the right word. Frank took a seat in the corner beside Ruth. The two of them sat there quietly, a 63-year-old carpenter and a 68-year-old retired teacher, like the most unlikely security detail in wedding history, waiting for the doors to open. At noon, I peeked through the curtain at the side of the barn. Marcus's side was full. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends from his engineering firm. His cousin had brought a toddler who was already asleep, and his college roommate was adjusting a bow tie that looked borrowed. My side was smaller, but it wasn't empty. Ruth's seat was reserved up front. Alexis and the college girls were there. 7 women from my greenhouse workshop, the Saturday morning group where I taught local mums how to start vegetable gardens. 3 landscaping clients who had become friends over the years. My accountant, Gloria, who once told me my quarterly taxes made her proud. And then I saw the back row. Far right. 3 figures. Richard stood in a dark suit, staring at his shoes. Donna sat rigidly with her purse on her lap like a shield. And Vanessa wore a dress that was slightly too formal for an outdoor barn wedding, scanning the room with the expression of someone cataloging exits. It came. My stomach dropped. Not because I was afraid. Because for one stupid reflexive second my heart whispered, maybe they're here to make it right. Then I watched Donna lean over and whisper something to Richard. He nodded without looking up, and I knew they weren't there for me. They were there so they could say they had been there. Attendance as alibi. I let the curtain fall and turned back to the room. Jeanette was adjusting her bouquet. Frank was brushing something off his sleeve. Ruth was reading Eleanor's letter one more time. I had shown it to her that morning, and she had cried quietly for 3 minutes. The coordinator stepped in. 15 minutes. The music started at 1 o'clock sharp. A string quartet Marcus had found through a friend began playing something soft and ascending. I didn't know the name, but it sounded like sunlight moving through trees. The bridesmaids walked first, Alexis, then Sarah, then Jeanette last. Jeanette paused at the door and looked back at me. She winked. Then she stepped through, and the aisle swallowed her in white light. Silence. The brief, held breath kind of silence where 200 people go still at once, and the only sound is the wind moving through the open sides of the barn. The coordinator touched my arm. Ready. I opened my clutch, took out Eleanor's letter, and read one line. The last one. The people who show up are your real family. I folded it, placed it back inside, and closed the clasp. Frank stepped beside me and offered his arm. His sleeve was crisp, but his hand was the same. Rough, warm, and calloused from 40 years of building things for people he loved. I placed my hand on his forearm and felt the steadiness of a man who did not shake. You good? He asked. I'm good. Then let's go show them what showing up looks like. The barn doors swung open. Light flooded in, October sun, low and golden, catching the dust motes in the air like someone had scattered glitter by hand. 200 heads turned. And there we were. Frank Delaney and Darcy Ingram, a carpenter and a gardener. Neither of us related by blood. Both of us exactly where we were supposed to be. I felt his hand cover mine on his arm, steady and warm, the rough grain of decades of work pressed against my skin. He took the first step and I matched it. We walked. I did not look at the back row. I did not need to. I looked straight ahead, where Marcus stood at the end of the aisle with wet eyes and a grin that said everything his words would say later. This was my wedding day. And I was not walking alone. The doors were open. 200 people saw. And the man holding my arm was not my father by blood. He was my father by choice. If you have ever found family outside of blood, someone who showed up when the people who should have shown up did not, hit subscribe and stay with me because what happened next is a moment I will carry forever. The aisle was 60 feet long. I know because I measured it myself during the venue walkthrough in August. 60 feet of reclaimed oak planks. The irony of walking on oak toward a future given to me by a man who built with it was not lost on me, though I did not think about it at the time. At the time I was counting Frank's steps. Left, right, left, slow and steady. The same rhythm he used when he planed a board. Measured. Intentional. The kind of pace that said, I have done this before in my bones, even if I haven't done it before in my life. The gasp started about 10 steps in. Not loud. Just the small, involuntary sounds people make when they are putting together a story in real time. Guests who knew Jeanette, the greenhouse workshop mums, and Gloria, my accountant, smiled and pressed tissues to their eyes. Guests who did not know us looked at Frank, then scanned the room for someone who looked like the father of the bride, only to find a man in the back row who would not meet anyone's eyes. I did not look at Richard. I want to be clear about that. I did not turn my head, search for his face, or give him the satisfaction of a glance, or the cruelty of a pointed one. I looked at Ruth, dabbing her eyes in the front row. At Jeanette, standing near the altar with her hand over her mouth. At the greenhouse workshop mums, 3 of whom were openly crying. Then I looked at Marcus. He stood at the end of the aisle, hands at his sides, eyes full. He nodded once at Frank. Not a greeting but a thank you. The kind of nod men exchange when words would take too long. And the moment was already perfect. In the back row, I was later told, Richard half stood, caught himself on the pew and sat back down. Donna grabbed his arm. Vanessa stared straight ahead with an expression Ruth later described as a woman watching a door close that she could never reopen. We reached the altar. The officiant smiled. She was a woman named Reverend Keene, short and gray-haired, with a kind of voice that made you feel everything would be fine even when it would not. Who gives this woman in marriage? Frank cleared his throat. He was not a man who spoke to crowds. He built for them, fixed things for them, fed them Sunday roast, and sent them home with leftovers. But he did not address them. Today he did. Her family was. Then quieter, as if he were saying it to me rather than the room. All of us who showed up. The room exhaled. I heard a soft sob from the front row. Ruth. Jeanette's mascara was already done for. Gloria was using her program as both a fan and a tissue. Frank turned to me, took both my hands and squeezed once. His grip was the same grip that had shaped the bookshelf, the cutting board and the boutonniere, the same hands. Go get married, kiddo. He placed my hand in Marcus's, stepped back, walked to the front row, and sat in the seat labeled with his name that morning, the seat my father had been supposed to fill. Marcus leaned in and mouthed 2 words to his dad. Thank you. Frank nodded, folded his hands in his lap, and I noticed sawdust on his right cuff. He always had sawdust on his right cuff. I turned to Marcus. The ceremony began. When it came time for vows, I said what I had written in the workshop 2 nights earlier, next to the oak bookshelf, on the back of a landscape sketch. I choose you, and I choose the family we build. Not the one we were given, but the one we make with our hands every day, from the ground up. Marcus said his vows. I do not remember the words. I remember his eyes. We were married at 1:27 in the afternoon. The reception started at 2 in the same barn, with the tables rearranged and the string lights glowing overhead. The band played something acoustic and warm and people danced. Owen, Vanessa's 3-year-old, ran between the tables chasing a balloon that had escaped its anchor. Lily sat on Richard's lap and asked for cake. At 3, Frank stood up for his toast. The room quieted in that way rooms do when they can feel something real about to happen. I'm going to keep this short because Marcus told me that if I talked for more than 2 minutes, he would play me off with a trombone. Laughter. I don't own a trombone, so I believe him. He raised his glass. The first time Darcy came to my house for Sunday dinner, I had a fern on the windowsill. It was dying. Had been dying for a year. I had given up on it. She walked in, looked at it, and within 10 minutes, she had repotted it, moved it to a different window, and told me I was overwatering it. He looked at me. I knew then that any woman who saves a dying plant without being asked is also the kind of woman who will save a dying old man from eating alone every Sunday. Silence. Then the room broke open. Applause. Cheers. Jeanette stood up and clapped until her palms were red. After the toast, people started talking, not to me directly but around me the way people talk at events when they want the person to overhear. She designed the garden at Ridgewood Library. You know, her company does the courthouse grounds. Have you seen them in spring? She runs a free workshop for mums every Saturday. My work was speaking for itself in a room full of people who had come because they chose to, while my own family sat at a corner table saying nothing. Richard found me at the dessert table. I was cutting into the lemon cake. My choice, not Donna's, when I felt someone step too close on my left side. I knew it was him before I turned. He smelled like the same aftershave he had worn since I was 7. Old Spice, the one in the white bottle. Darcy. Turned. He was holding a glass of water, not champagne. His eyes were red at the edges, and his jaw was doing that thing it did when he was trying not to say something that might come out wrong. That man. He did a good job. I looked at him. His name is Frank. Richard nodded. Frank. Who is? He did a good job up there. He did. Silence. Richard looked at the cake, the table, anything that wasn't my face. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I looked at him. Not with anger, not with forgiveness, but with the flat, clear gaze of someone who had spent 32 years watching a man choose the path of least resistance. Sorry that you missed it, I said. Or sorry that everyone saw. He flinched. Just a little. The kind of flinch that only happens when someone says out loud what you've been thinking for 3 days. Before he could answer, Donna appeared, her hand on his elbow, guiding him away the way she always did. Firmly, like she was steering a shopping trolley. Richard, come sit down. As she turned him away, she leaned towards me. Her voice was low and controlled, the same tone she had used on the phone Tuesday night. Don't make a scene, Darcy. I picked up the cake knife and set a slice on a plate. I'm not the one making a scene, Mum. I'm cutting cake. She walked away. Richard followed. He always followed. The father-daughter dance was at 4. Except it wasn't a father-daughter dance. It was Frank and me on the barn floor beneath the string lights, dancing to a song Marcus had chosen, an acoustic cover of Lean on Me that made Jeanette cry for the 3rd time. Frank danced the way he built, carefully, with attention to where his feet were going. He held my hand in his and kept his other hand on my shoulder, not my waist, because Frank was the kind of man who respected a boundary even at a wedding. I step on feet, he warned. I know. Marcus told me. That boy has no loyalty. I laughed. The room laughed. 200 people watched a carpenter dance with a gardener and felt something true underneath the music. At the corner table, Vanessa watched. Preston wasn't there. He had a work trip, or at least that was what she told Donna. The chair beside her was empty, and she gripped her champagne flute like it owed her something. Ruth walked over and sat down beside Vanessa. Not hostile, not warm, just present. The way Ruth did everything. Eleanor would have been so proud of Darcy today, Ruth said. Vanessa looked at her. She would have been proud of both of you, Vanessa, if you had let her. Vanessa's eyes filled. She set down her glass, stood, and walked to the bathroom. She stayed in there for 15 minutes. When she came out, her makeup had been freshly applied, but her eyes were swollen, and her hands were still shaking the way they had at Thanksgiving. I saw her cross the room from the dance floor. I did not go to her. I did not send anyone after her. Kept dancing with Frank. Some doors close because you shut them. Others close because the person on the other side stopped holding them open. I did not see my parents leave. Jeanette told me later that they slipped out around 5, somewhere between the cake cutting and the bouquet toss, the way you leave a party you were never really at. The drive home for Richard and Donna took 40 minutes. Ruth heard from a neighbor, who heard from Donna's sister, that neither of them spoke for the first 20. Then Richard said, "That man built her a bookshelf." Donna looked at him. "What?" "In her workshop. Oak with her initials carved inside." Donna stared at the road. "When was the last time we built her anything, Donna?" She had no answer. The road between Ridgewood and their house ran along the reservoir. Flat water, dark trees, the kind of drive that gives you far too much time to think. "She didn't even look at me," Richard said. "When she walked down the aisle." Donna said nothing. "She didn't look at me. She was looking at Marcus." She was looking at everyone except me. And she was right too." Donna still said nothing. Richard pulled into the driveway. Donna went inside. Richard stayed in the car. The garage light was still on from Friday night. The photo of 12-year-old Darcy holding the tomato was still on the pegboard. The greenhouse was gone. Donna had made him take it down years ago. But the faint marks where it had stood were still visible on the lawn, even in the dark. Some things leave outlines long after they have been removed. Richard checked his phone. No message from Darcy. No message coming. The wedding was over. His daughter was married. A carpenter had done what he was supposed to do. And the seat labeled Frank Delaney at the front of the barn had been the loudest statement anyone made all day. Without saying another word, Richard went inside and closed the door. Monday morning, 2 days after the wedding, I opened the workshop at 7, just as I always did. There was a new order waiting on my desk, a landscape design for the children's wing garden at Ridgewood Memorial Hospital. 12,200 square feet. Sensory plants for children in recovery. Texture gardens. Things they could touch, smell, and hold. Marcus brought coffee at 8. Black, with chives from the windowsill pot still miraculously alive. Frank came by at 9 with a cutting board he had been working on for weeks. Cherrywood with a walnut stripe inlaid down the center. "For the newlyweds," he said, as if he hadn't walked me down the aisle 48 hours earlier, as if it were simply another Saturday. I set it on the counter beside the bookshelf he had built 3 years ago. Same man. Same hands. Same showing up without being asked. My phone buzzed at noon. One text from Richard. "Can we talk?" I read it, then set the phone face down on the drafting table. I opened the hospital garden plans and started sketching the sensory path. Rosemary for memory. Lavender for calm. Mint for energy. Plants that gave you something simply by being near them. The greenhouse I built at 14 was 7 feet tall and grew tomatoes for one family. This one would be 12,200 square feet and grow healing for children who needed it. I picked up my pencil and drew the first line of the path, then the second, then the border beds, then the entrance arch outside. October light moved through my workshop window and caught the carved letters on the inside of the bookshelf. DI small enough to miss. Deep enough to last. I did not answer the text. I had work to do. 2 weeks after the wedding, Vanessa called. I was on a job site at the hospital garden, measuring drainage. 2 weeks after the wedding, I was on a job site at the hospital garden, measuring drainage grades, when Vanessa's name appeared on my screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But something in me, the same remnant of the girl who had repaired a greenhouse hinge twice because she believed broken things could be fixed, made me answer. "Darcy, I'm here." There was a silence long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Preston left," she finally said. I set down my measuring tape. He had moved out the week before, taking his things while she was at the grocery store and leaving only a note on the counter. Waited. Vanessa's breathing was uneven, not crying exactly but trying desperately not to. "I just thought you should know." "Okay." Another pause. Then her voice broke. Not dramatically, not the way she performed for my parents, but quietly, like a crack in a wall that had been spreading for years and had finally reached the surface. I thought if I could keep Mom and Dad focused on me, it would fill the gap. Preston wasn't there. The kids weren't enough. I needed to be the center of something. And your wedding was in the way. Your happiness was in the way. I let that sit. I did not comfort her. I did not attack her. I stood on a construction site with dirt on my boots, holding the phone and listening to my sister finally say the thing she had been hiding behind manipulation for 3 years. Vanessa, I hope you find what you need. Mean that. But I'm not your emotional cushion anymore. I can't be the thing you lean on while you push me down. She cried quietly. Let her. Then I said goodbye and went back to measuring. The following week, a letter arrived. Handwritten. My father's handwriting was small and slightly tilted, the penmanship of a man who had learned to write in a school that still used fountain pens. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a call. It was a real letter, mailed with a stamp and postmarked Ridgewood. I opened it alone in the workshop, standing beside the bookshelf. Darcy, I should have walked you down that aisle. I knew it when Vanessa asked me not to. I knew it when your mother told me it would be fine. And I knew it when I sat in the back row and watched another man do what I was supposed to do. Chose wrong. I have been choosing wrong your whole life and telling myself it was easier. It wasn't easier. It was just cowardly. I let your sister use those children as a wall between us. I let your mother tell me that keeping the peace was the same as being a good father. It wasn't. Keeping the peace meant keeping you at a distance. And I did it because I was too afraid of what would happen if I pushed back. Frank earned what I threw away. He showed up. I did not. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not think I would forgive me either. But I want you to know that the photo of you holding that tomato is still on my wall. And I wish I had told you then what I should have said 1,000 times since. I am proud of you, Darcy. Always was. I was just too weak to say it out loud. Dad. I read it twice, folded it, and placed it in the desk drawer beside Eleanor's letter. 2 letters. 2 very different weights. I did not reply. I used to think family was the people you were born to, the ones who shared your blood, your name, and your dinner table. I don't think that anymore. Family is the man who drives 40 minutes to your workshop on a Saturday to fix a hinge you never asked him to fix. Family is a yellowed envelope from a woman who has been gone for 11 years. Family is the person who says yes before you even finish asking. Family is who shows up. That is my story. 3 days of silence. 1 letter from a grandmother and 1 from a carpenter who said yes before I finished asking. If this story reminded you that family is a choice, not an obligation, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.